Welcome students to week 4. This is a big one. This week, we're going to not only split ourselves up into our departments and organize the company that way, but we're also going to finally submit our product or service idea. With us taking these big steps this week, we really have most of our company set in place. Some of the next things that we need to do revolve around determining our collective identity. There's things that we want to set up to show everybody that our company is unique and different than everything else in the market right now. One of these things is a distinct purpose, aka the company's mission. It's on this topic specifically that the podcast guest for this week and I talk about. Again, this week we're splitting off into our different departments. Each department has an executive leader, so there's 6 mandatory executive roles that need to be filled on every single team. Once our executive leaders have been elected in, please fill out the organizational structure form. The link for this can be found in the description. Those that become executives will also get access to a Google Drive folder. This folder has a ton of resources that you need for actually operating your company, so please make sure you fill out the organizational structure form by the end of your meeting. In the past few weeks, we've spent a lot of time talking about our product or service idea. We've planted a bunch of different seeds, and now it's time to pick out which one we want to grow. By the end of this program week, please fill out either a product approval form or a service approval form. The JA team, including myself, are going to go through all these ideas and just give you the final thumbs up to make sure you can pursue that idea. This is also an exciting time because we have 2 big events coming up. The first one is executive training, which will take place on November 15th. All elected executive team members have to attend this meeting. If by some extreme measure you can't attend, then please talk to one of your non-executive team members to take your place and take down notes for your training session. Alongside of the training itself, we're also going to be having a little competition amongst all the JA teams. On Friday, November 12th, every single executive team will receive one of 3 challenges. Spend the weekend with the executive team to create a solution, a business idea to address this specific issue. On Monday, or the day of the training, we're going to be taking some time to pitch our solutions. There's going to be a set of judges, and there will be a final executive team that will win the executive team challenge. Winners of each challenge will be featured at the celebration achievement at the end of the year, as well as a social media post that will be put in front of the eyes of a bunch of Calgary's business leaders. The team that wins the entire challenge will also be taking back a special prize for every single member of their team. Another event that we have coming up is the Business Development Workshop. This is going to take place on November 22nd. The Business Development Workshop is an opportunity for every student in the company program to learn about a bunch of different aspects of business. This event is open to all company program students. However, there is limited capacity, so it's first come, first serve. Within this event, there's going to be 3 sessions where you're going to learn about a general topic in business or leadership. It really is an opportunity for you to gain a little bit of extra skills and something that'll be useful for you to apply in the future. Again, it is first come, first serve, so you can begin to RSVP by clicking the link in the description. Up next, we have our interview portion. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Steve Brierley, who's been a longtime friend of JA. Steve works at Optimum Talents, and he's helped many individuals and many companies grow and develop these soft skills. We're specifically talking about things like company culture and the mission statement for your company. This is what I meant by creating a collective identity. These are the next steps that you're going to be taking in the coming weeks, so it's important to tune in and listen up. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Very good. How you doing?
I'm doing very well too. Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us this week in the Company Program podcast. Steve, every interview I like to just start it off so the students get a better idea of who you are. Would you mind sharing a bit about yourself and kind of your journey up to this point?
Sure. So I work right now for a company called Gallagher. It's a Canadian, actually international benefits organization. I'm the vice president responsible for leadership assessment and development, which means that I build leadership programs for executives and leaders. I do assessments. I do a lot of coaching, and we do it for large and small organizations across Canada right now, and also extending into the US. Before getting here, though, I've probably spent the past 25 years in different types of leadership development roles, here in Calgary. I ran a computer training company. When I After about a year, I then moved down to California, did the same thing. So I had a chance to understand culture actually in work down in the States and how it's very different than here in Canada. Also worked in Arizona, came back, worked at U of A, worked at SAIT, both in the corporate training departments. And then I joined the energy sector. So in Canada and Enbridge, I was responsible for all people development across North America. And then after that, I joined Canadian Tire's corporate office, where I was responsible for talent management for Canadian Tire, Marks, and Sport Check.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
Lots of experience, in different kind of, yeah, like people management, as you said. I think that's a great term for it. And I'm glad you mentioned the key word that we're going to be talking about here, which is company culture. At this point, the students we've had a few conversations about leadership, about teamwork, and we have mentioned company culture before, but haven't really delved into it. So I guess just so everyone's on the same page. Would you mind sharing with us what your definition of company culture is?
Yeah, and fantastic question. And by the way, I just want to mention this is a very important topic right now in all of the organizations we're working in. And there's multiple components that make up culture. Right now we're working on three different things. The first thing is, what is the leadership? How do the leaders treat the people? How do the leaders lead, and how do they engage their teams? The second is, for people, how do people engage the organization? Is it their purpose, or do they want to be there? Are they doing the work they really feel like they should be doing? And then the culture, which sometimes is written and sometimes is unwritten, is around sometimes the actual physical location, the values of the organization, the mission, and really the place and where people work. So ultimately, if I described in the culture, I'd say the culture is, um, it really is the sometimes written or unwritten way an organization gets work done.
All right, thank you, and that makes a lot of sense. And um, I guess one question I have from that definition to, I think, a point worth expanding upon. I'm glad you kind of differentiated written and unwritten culture, right? So an assignment we have coming up very soon here, something that every student team needs to do, is write down a mission statement. And so that's kind of something that's written down. But could you expand a little bit more about what defines an unwritten company culture, right? Because in my experience, there's sometimes quite a deviance between the two, or a deviation
Absolutely.
rather. Yeah. So kind of, how do you create an unwritten company culture?
Sure. And so you think about a lot of large organizations will have a mission, and it'll be branded, it'll be on a document, it'll be sent out on a pillar or something. And then it's up to the leaders to actually interpret that mission and how do they apply to how they make it work. And different leaders really focus on different things. The unwritten part is really about think of mission as being very big, and where you're going to go. It's how do you get there? And the leaders actually turn that big mission into daily activities. And culture could be simply, how does a leader connect with people? Do they connect on a close basis? Do they know the people on their team? How do they deal with conflict? Really, when you think about it, very simple things, but there's a lot of importance in culture right now. So the unwritten part is how we actually informally operate together. It may not be written down, but it may be something as simple as, every morning, if you were my leader, when you walk through the office, you walk around and say hi to everybody. And you'd be surprised at how such a simple task is not necessarily being observed these days. But you'd be surprised at how a simple task like that can have such a tremendous impact on an organization. So that'd be a way for me, would be to describe it.
No, and that makes perfect sense, right? So it seems like, a part of it is the relationship building part. It's about the behaviors as well as the communications, right? So the unwritten company culture, that's always been something in my own personal experiences where again, I noticed that discrepancy where you say you want to do one thing, but then it seems to come out from the other end, and it's really the leaders that define that unwritten culture. And so I guess kind of switching, looking on the other side of the coin here, talking about written culture and talking about like a mission statement or a vision statement. The students they're just now making their teams, right? So they're
Great.
really thinking about what is it that we want to do? How do we want to serve our community? So what can especially younger people do when they get together? How do they really define that joint goal that they have? How do they create that vision?
So that's a great question. And you know what? I think a very important question is what's the story of the company program? So if someone were to ask me to describe the company, what would I say in 10 words or less? So what's that story? It's a very challenging question, but it's a very enlightening question. And we do this, by the way, for all the corporations we work with. And we get people to really boil down and think about what would you want people to say about the organization, or what do you want people to know about the organization? That's very important. So we ask them, what's the narrative? What's the story? And that can translate into some specific mission components, but it's that story you need to start with.
And that makes sense. And so, when we talk about kind of a follow-up question to that, is there any component of deriving a mission or a vision from your product or service idea? What's kind of the relationship there? Because the students know what their product is or their service is. How do they translate their purpose through that into like a formal statement? Is it the same kind of steps?
It's very similar, but let's use an example. So General Electric or GE, they have a story, and their employees say, "What do you do?" Well, we bring good things to life. It's also a tagline, and so they use that as a filter for everything they do. And when we create our mission, are we bringing good things to life? And are we creating our vision? What is it going to look like? Have we brought good things to life? That's why it's so important to understand that story up front. And um, it really creates clarity, let's say, for people. So when the students are getting together, once you've identified what that story is, and it's think of it as being very big. I just did one recently where their story was all things are possible if you try. And well, what does that mean? Well, now when you relate it to the mission, it's like they're going to make some really big goals in their mission. They're going to like it's going to be fantastic. It's like yeah, because you know what? If we put our mind to it, we can make it happen. I love that one, by the way. It's so aspirational.
Yeah, that's when I heard that, and right away, like it clicked in my head, right? Um, even a lot of the companies that you identify, and students, this is more so a message to you, right? The companies that you identify, the ones that you know about, the ones that you feel like you know and understand closely, even if you've
Mhm,
never met an employee from those companies, it's those ones where they communicated through their mission or vision.
mhm.
So kind of moving along, another question that I personally had and I think it'd be insightful for the students to know is about culture and also working environment, right? So at this point we all know that we need to work together in order to get towards our goal. What are specific actions that the leaders or just the regular company program participants can take within the program to promote an environment of collaboration?
Well, the first thing is it's a bit of a ambiguous word, but it's about caring about other people. So within your company team or company program team, it's like, you want to demonstrate you care, and you do that by simply asking questions before you meet every time. Ask about some of the challenges, ask about some of the successes that you've experienced personally to create that trust. I'm going to say that from a leadership perspective, it's checking in. It's not just checking in when you get together, it's checking in on a regular basis, but being very sincere about it and using different types of technology. It could be a phone call, it could be a text, it could be a Zoom call or a Teams call, it could be face to face. However, you need to look at it from the impact perspective. Anytime I see you, there's going to be more impact. I'll give you another great example of something just recently where a company, large multi-million dollar company, they've defined their culture by the importance of connecting. And one of the things they're doing is they're meeting first, using email second. So they're not using email to connect, they're using email to confirm. And I just thought that's fantastic. And so just call somebody, pick up the phone. There's such a power in voice, and there's such a power in visual. And those are two very simple examples. I'll give you a third one, which is really important. And it's really management by walking around. It's about connecting and really understanding. And the key word here is connecting. It's about connecting with people, understanding everybody's different. Everybody brings something different to the table and celebrating those differences.
Yeah, and that's very well said. And again, I think that point specifically about connection, it's something that to point out the obvious during the pandemic, it's something that we all have
Yeah,
a deeper understanding and appreciation of, right?
sure.
Even me personally, it's like I realize now how much I took it for granted all those previous years, right? And even with some of the conversations I have with the students and the volunteers, this is a virtual program right now, and sometimes it's difficult when you don't have that physical connection, right?
Absolutely.
And even with phone calls are more effective than emails, and meeting face to face is even more effective than that. That's something that's really been ringing true with me lately. So I think you articulated that very well. And unfortunately, we do have to wrap up the interview soon here.
Yeah,
One
sure.
question I had to ask you, since you are familiar with the program, and also since you have so much experience looking at different companies in so many specific cases, do you have any pieces of advice for these young entrepreneurs that are in the company program?
Sure. I would say, first on the culture piece, spend more time than you think you need until you actually have defined what you want the culture to be, what it looks like, how you'll measure it, whether it's being effective, and revisit it on a regular basis. So it's not something, it's not one and done. It's every time you get together. And it'd be a simple question, as it relates to culture. And I would ask, so are we living what we agreed to as far as the culture is concerned? That's a big one. From an entrepreneurial perspective, understand that culture is going to drive your performance, and if you have a poor culture, you're not going to perform. Yeah, and as an entrepreneur, I need to leverage the importance of having a great culture. I can think of so many organizations that have great cultures. I'll just do a quick example. Let's use Apple. Apple, everybody uses Apple, but think about the culture going into an Apple store where people are not being paid a lot of money, and they're working for the t-shirt, and it's no disrespect here, and they love their jobs. They love dealing with people. Uh, Compare that to other organizations where you don't get that same feeling. So what's going on? It's the culture. So when you have a strong culture, people are proud to work there. They tell everybody that they work in the Genius Bar. I mean, what a stroke of genius to call it a Genius Bar. Who doesn't want to be part of a Genius Bar? You know, I never thought of myself as being a genius, but I'd like to be part of the club. So take some great examples out there of organizations like Apple, Lululemon, Benevity. There's a whole group of Canadian organizations that really demonstrate great culture.
And yeah, that's such a great point and a great piece of advice. I actually think I'm going to walk away with that as well. I never thought about the idea that a company's internal culture really bleeds through in their operations, right? You can really see it in the product that they have or the
Sure.
service that they have. And you're absolutely right. When I go to an Apple store, it's very far and a few in between visits. But when I do, I can tell that it's the Apple store. It has a distinctive feel. There's a
Yeah.
distinctive service, and I'm sure that, now that you pointed out, I'm sure that traces back to whatever else is going on during the training and however the internal conversations go. So that's a great point and definitely a great piece of advice, very relevant to our topic as well. I guess my final question, Steve, I want to see if you had any final thoughts that you want to share with the students, regarding company program, culture, entrepreneurship, anything at all.
Just from my exposure, I'm so impressed with company program and met a number of people who have really just blown me away with their maturity level and their experience. And I think if there's one thing to take away from this, everybody's developing a product or a service, but what they're going to remember, what you're going to remember as a company program participant is the culture of the team you were part of. You're going to forget about what you made. You might remember it, but you're going to remember the connections you made, how you were made to be felt. And I think that, keep that in mind. How do I want people to feel about our company program, and what do I want them to say 15 years from now when they're talking about being a part of JA when they're in high school, and how it changed their lives. And we have an opportunity to actually do that. We, as in the students, who can make these company program cultures really powerful.
That's very true. As an alumni of the company program myself, when I reflect on my teenage years in the program, I think more so about the friendships I made, about those specific memories. I think about everything around our product and service rather than, oh, we made this really cool, product. We did this really cool thing. We won this award. So it really is a special thing, and we're still early on in the program. So, again, students, I think it's going to be a very exciting journey for all of you. But
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thanks for asking me. I appreciate being part of this.
And that was the interview portion. Again, I want to give a big thank you to Steve for participating in this interview. It's definitely important to take these points into consideration because when you don't know what exactly it is you're doing, you're not going to move anywhere and you're not going to progress to where you want to be. Again, this is a big week because we're making some big decisions. We have our executive elections this week and we're also organizing ourselves into our different departments. When you're complete with this process by the end of your meeting, please fill out the organizational structure form, which again can be found in the description box. We also want to submit our product or service form, whichever one you chose. Those links can also be found in the description. It's extremely helpful to get this out of the way sooner rather than later so we can actually get there and get our hands on a product or service and build our company and learn a lot. We also have the executive training coming up, which is on November 15th, and then the business development workshop, which is on November 22nd. The latter is open for all students and you can RSVP through the form in the description. And that's all for this week. Traditionally, week 4 has been one of the highlights for many of the people participating in the program, and it makes sense as to why. Again, students, I encourage everybody to run for an executive position and I encourage all of you to submit and finalize your product or service idea. I look forward to seeing you next week where, again, we're going to finalize what will go into making our company.